Alina Cole did not walk into rooms. She arrived. There was something about the way she carried herself, shoulders back, chin level, eyes scanning everything like she was already 3 steps ahead of whoever was in front of her. She was the kind of woman who made people straighten up without saying a word. Senior project lead at Meridian Global Strategies, one of Atlanta's most respected consulting firms, and at 31 years old, she had earned every single title on her business card the hard way. No shortcuts. No favors. No one to thank but herself. Her team called her the standard behind her back, not because she was cold, but because she never accepted anything less than excellence. Not from them. Not from herself. Never from herself. So when her boss, Director Harmon, called her into his office on a Thursday morning and slid a folder across his mahogany desk, Alina picked it up without flinching. Kate J. Holdings, she read aloud, flipping through the pages with calm precision. Soul-based. Expanding into the American market. Real estate, tech infrastructure, and urban development. They want a 6-month collaboration, Director Harmon said, leaning back in his chair. And they specifically requested our best. I told them we'd send exactly that. Alina looked up from the folder. When do I leave? You don't. Their CEO is flying in next week. He'll be working out of a temporary office in Midtown. You'll be his primary point of contact for the duration of the partnership. She nodded, closed the folder, and stood. I'll have a strategy deck ready by Monday. She walked out before he could say anything else. That evening, alone in her high-rise apartment with the Atlanta skyline glowing through floor-to-ceiling windows, Alina sat at her kitchen table and opened her laptop. She pulled up everything she could find on Kate J. Holdings. Revenue reports, acquisition history, press releases, expansion strategies. And then she found him. Ryu Taejin, CEO and founder of Kate J. Holdings. 35 years old. Born in Busan, South Korea. Built his company from a single real estate venture into a multi-billion-dollar empire in under a decade. Known for being precise, private, and unervingly perceptive in business negotiations. His photo stared back at her from the screen, a man with a composed, unreadable expression and eyes that looked like they had seen more than they let on. Alina studied his face for a moment longer than necessary, then closed the tab. Strictly business, she told herself. Ryu Taejin landed in Atlanta on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, he was already in the Midtown office reviewing documents with his small team. He was not a man who wasted time. But the moment Alina walked into that conference room, something in him went still. She placed her portfolio on the table, extended her hand, and said, Alina Cole, Senior Project Lead, Meridian Global. I'll be your primary contact for the duration of this collaboration. Her grip was firm. Her gaze was direct. Her tone left absolutely no room for small talk. Taejin shook her hand and held her gaze for just a second longer than expected. Ryu Taejin, he said. Thank you for coming. Of course, she said, pulling her hand back and opening her portfolio. I've prepared an initial strategy framework based on Kate J. Holdings' expansion objectives. I'd like to walk you through the market analysis first, then we can move into. Miss Cole, he said gently, interrupting her. She paused and looked at him. Would you like coffee first? Water? You came all the way here. I don't want to start without making sure you're comfortable. It was such a simple gesture. Such a quiet, considerate thing to say. And for a split second, just once, something shifted behind Alina's eyes. Something small and careful and locked away. I'm fine, she said. Let's begin. The first 2 weeks of the collaboration were intense, focused, and deeply professional. Alina was exceptional at her job. Taejin quickly came to understand why Meridian had sent her. She anticipated problems before they existed, communicated with surgical precision, and commanded every room she entered without raising her voice. He was impressed. Genuinely. But he also noticed things that had nothing to do with business. He noticed how she never accepted his offer to grab lunch together, always citing a working lunch at her desk. He noticed how she stepped back slightly whenever he got too close to review a document. He noticed the way her eyes would go somewhere else for just a moment, distant and unreachable, before snapping back to focus. He said nothing about any of it. It was not his place. But he started doing small things. Quietly. Without announcement. He would have her preferred green tea waiting on the conference table before she arrived. When late-night work sessions ran long, he made sure food was brought in and set near her workspace. When she gave a particularly sharp presentation to his board of directors over a video call, and they responded with overwhelming approval, he walked over to her afterward and said, simply, "That was outstanding work." "Thank you." Alina looked at him. "That's what I'm here for," she said. He smiled, a small, unhurried smile. "I know, but it still deserves to be said." She gathered her files and walked out. In the elevator alone, she pressed her back against the wall and let out a slow breath. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were not entirely steady. She took the stairs the next morning just to avoid the enclosed space. By the third week, the tension was something both of them could feel, but only one of them acknowledged. Taejin was not a man who forced himself into spaces where he was not wanted. But he was also not a man who pretended not to see what was right in front of him. And what was right in front of him was a woman who was brilliant and beautiful and clearly fighting something enormous all by herself. One evening, after everyone else had gone home and only the two of them remained in the office reviewing contract terms, he set down his pen and looked at her. "Alina," he said. She did not look up. "I see a discrepancy in Section 4. We need to flag this before the legal team." "Alina." Something in his voice made her stop. She looked up slowly. "Are you all right?" he asked. The question was so plain, so honest. No agenda behind it. Just a man looking at a woman and asking if she was okay. She stared at him for a moment. Then she straightened her spine, gathered her papers, and said, "I'm perfectly fine. I'll send you the revised section by morning." She was out the door before he could respond. 3 weeks became 4. 4 became 5. And Taejin, patient as water carving stone, kept showing up. Kept being steady. Kept being kind without expectation. And it was slowly, quietly, devastatingly working. The way he listened when people spoke, like what they were saying, actually mattered to him. The way he never raised his voice even when a deal went sideways. The way he remembered small things she mentioned once in passing and somehow incorporated them without making it seem deliberate. She hated it. Not him. She could never quite bring herself to hate him. She hated how he made her feel. She hated that her walls, which had held for 13 years without a single crack, were beginning to show fractures just because one man kept showing up with green tea and a quiet, steady presence. She started being colder. More clipped. More efficient. She answered his questions in bullet points. She rescheduled meetings to add buffer between their one-on-one sessions. She stopped making eye contact during small moments. She thought if she froze him out hard enough, her heart would follow along. It did not. Taejin's sister, Ryo Soyeon, flew in from Seoul in the 5th week for a brief visit. She was warm, sharp-tongued in the best way, and immediately attached herself to the Atlanta office like she belonged there. She met Alina on a Wednesday afternoon and within 10 minutes, looked at her brother and said, in Korean, "She's extraordinary." "You have terrible timing." Taejin shot her a look. Soyeon smiled at Alina pleasantly and switched back to English. "My brother speaks very highly of your work." Alina glanced at Taejin. Something crossed his face, steady, unapologetic. He did not look away. "We have a strong working relationship," Alina said carefully. "Of course," Soyeon said sweetly and said nothing more. Later that night, Soyeon called their mother back in Seoul. Mrs. Ryu Boksoon was a formidable woman in her own right, sharp, proud, and deeply traditional. She had spent years hoping her son would settle down with someone from a good Korean family. When Soyeon casually mentioned there was a woman in Atlanta who seemed to have caught her brother's attention, a Black American woman, Mrs. Ryu went very quiet. Then she said, firmly, "Tell your brother to focus on the business." Soyeon sighed. The business, Soyeon." Back in Atlanta, Taejin was doing exactly the opposite of focusing only on business. He showed up one morning to find Alina standing alone in the empty conference room, her back to the door, perfectly still, staring at nothing. Her phone was face down on the table. Her hands were clasped in front of her so tightly her knuckles had changed color. He stepped inside quietly and said her name. She spun around, and for one unguarded second, he saw it. The rawness behind her eyes. The exhaustion of carrying something too heavy for too long. The look of a woman who had been fighting alone for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to put down the sword. Then the armor snapped back into place. "I was just reviewing the morning's agenda," she said. He looked at her. Gentle. Unwavering. "You don't have to do that with me." "Do what?" "Pretend." Alina's jaw tightened. "Taejin, I'm not asking you to explain anything," he said, voice low and even. "I'm just saying, you don't have to pretend with me." She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her chest pulled, an ache so deep and old it had almost become part of her bones. "Let's get started on the morning's review," she said. He let it go. For now. 2 days later, he stopped. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. He simply pulled back. Quietly. Professionally. He became exactly what she had always insisted they be, purely, strictly professional. He stopped with the green tea. Stopped with the small considerations. Stopped trying to reach past her walls. If she wanted distance, he would give her distance. He told himself it was the right thing to do. That he could not keep pouring attention into someone who was committed to rejecting it. That he had his own heart to protect too. What he did not expect was how loudly the silence would speak. Alina noticed the change within 48 hours. Of course she did. Her mind cataloged everything, always had, always would. It was both her greatest gift and her heaviest burden. She noticed how he no longer lingered after meetings ended. How his messages became exactly as formal as hers. How the warmth that had quietly lived in every interaction was simply gone. She told herself it was better this way. She sat in her apartment that Friday night and stared at the skyline and told herself it was absolutely better this way. Then she pressed her face into her hands and felt something she had not let herself feel in a very long time. She was not okay. She had not been okay for a very, very long time. The following Monday morning, Taejin was in the conference room alone, coffee in hand, reading through legal documents. Alina walked in, set her bag down, and did not look at him as she began setting up her laptop. The room was quiet. Too quiet. He set down his coffee and looked up at her. "Alina." She kept her eyes on her screen. "I'm just pulling up the timeline for the..." "Alina, look at me." Something in his voice, not angry, not cold, just stripped of everything except honesty, made her stop. She looked up at him. He held her gaze. Steady. Open. Everything right there on the surface, nothing hidden. "Look me in the eyes," he said quietly, "and tell me you feel nothing. Tell me there is nothing here. And I will walk away. I will be the most professional colleague you have ever had for the rest of this collaboration, and I will never bring this up again." The room held its breath. Alina opened her mouth. She looked him in the eyes. She could not do it. Her mouth closed. Her eyes dropped. Her hands, those perfectly steady, always in control hands, were trembling slightly against her laptop keyboard. He stood up slowly, gave her space, began to move toward the door. "Taejin." Her voice, just barely above a whisper. But it stopped him completely. He turned. She was still looking at her hands. Her shoulders had dropped not in defeat, but in the way they drop when someone finally decides to put down what they have been carrying. "When I was 18, she said. Her voice was steady. Carefully, deliberately steady. "Something happened to me." Silence. "I never told anyone." She swallowed. "I buried it. I built everything you see on top of it. My career, my independence, my strength. I built all of it on top of something I never dealt with." She finally looked up at him. "And then you walked in here being exactly what you are. And I didn't know what to do with that." Taejin did not move. He did not speak. He let her words settle like they deserved to. Then he walked back, sat down across from her, and said, "Thank you for telling me that. Not, I'm sorry. Not, that must have been hard. Just thank you for trusting me enough." Alina looked at him, and for the first time in 13 years, she did not feel entirely alone in the room. The morning after Alina spoke her truth into that quiet conference room, she arrived at the office to find Taejin already there. Not working. Just sitting with 2 cups of green tea waiting. He slid one toward her when she sat down. "I want to ask you something," he said. "And you can say no." "Ask." Have you ever spoken to anyone? A therapist? A counselor? She looked at the table. No. Would you consider it? The silence stretched for a moment. Alina had spent 13 years controlling everything within her reach. The idea of sitting in front of a stranger and unraveling, even slightly, felt like standing at the edge of something with no visible bottom. But she had also spent 13 years exhausted. And she was so deeply tired. I'll think about it, she said. It was the most honest answer she had given anyone in years. She thought about it for 3 days. On the 4th day, she made an appointment. She did not tell Taejin. She just showed up that Thursday morning and said, I made an appointment. Friday at 2. He looked at her. Would it help if someone drove you? I can drive myself. I know you can. He paused. Would it help? She looked at him for a long moment. The armor flickered. Just slightly. You can drive, she said. He nodded once. Like it was settled. Like it was simple. Her therapist's name was Dr. Patricia Webb, a sharp, warm woman in her 50s who worked out of a calm, sunlit office in Buckhead. She had the kind of face that made people feel like they could breathe. Alina sat across from her and folded her hands in her lap and said, I don't really know how to do this. Dr. Webb smiled. Most people don't. That's okay. We'll figure it out together. There was a long pause. Alina looked at the window, then at the floor, then at her own hands. When I was 18, she began, her voice low and controlled. A man I trusted took something from me that I never gave him permission to take. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. He forced himself on me. In a place I was supposed to be safe. The words sat in the room like stones dropped into still water. Dr. Webb did not flinch. She did not rush to fill the silence. She simply held the space and let Alina breathe. I never reported it, Alina continued. I never told my family. I never told a friend. I showered until my skin felt raw, and I told myself if I never spoke about it, it would stop existing. Her voice cracked, just barely. But it didn't. It lived in my body. In my sleep. In every room I walked into. In every man who got too close. In every hand that reached for me even with good intentions. She looked at Dr. Webb. I remember everything. Every detail of that night. His face. His voice. The way the room smelled. I have a photographic memory, and it means I have never been able to forget. Not even for one day. Dr. Webb leaned forward gently. Alina, what happened to you is not your fault. It was never your fault. And the fact that you survived it, that you built an entire life while carrying this, tells me something important about who you are. Alina's eyes glistened. She blinked it back. What? She whispered. That you were never broken. You were wounded. And wounds, when they are finally tended to, can heal. Alina pressed her lips together hard. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. She did not speak again for the rest of the session. Outside in the parking lot, Taejin sat in his car with a book he was not reading and waited. He was there when she walked out 40 minutes later. She got into the passenger seat. She did not say anything for several minutes as he drove. Then she said, she wants me to come back next week. Okay, he said. She said. Alina stopped. Started again. She said the fact that I built everything I have while carrying what I was carrying means I am stronger than I think. He glanced at her. She's right. Alina turned to look out the window. Her throat moved. I know, she said softly. I just needed someone else to say it. The weeks that followed were not easy. They were not the kind of healing that happened quickly or cleanly. Alina went to therapy every Friday. Some days she came out looking hollowed out and fragile. Other days she came out looking like she had set something heavy down somewhere and was learning to walk without the weight. Taejin drove her every single time. He never asked what was said inside. He never pushed. He just showed up. Every Friday. Without fail. Some evenings after her sessions, they would stop for food, nothing elaborate, just a quiet place where they could sit across from each other and be two people learning to exist in each other's space. Taejin would talk about small things, a memory from his childhood in Busan, something funny his sister said, a business deal that had gone sideways in the most ridiculous way possible. He talked to fill the silence with warmth, not pressure. Alina would listen. And slowly, she began to talk back. Not about the heavy things. Not yet. Just small things. Her grandmother's cooking. The first time she closed a major deal and stood in the parking lot afterward and cried because she had never felt so proud of herself. The way Atlanta looked just before a summer storm. She talked, and he listened, and something between them grew quietly and steadily, like something that had always been there, just waiting for enough light. So-yeon called from Seoul on a Sunday evening. "How is she?" she asked her brother. "She's strong," he said. "Stronger than she knows." "And you? How are you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Careful," he finally said. So-yeon laughed softly. "You like her, Taejin. Just say it." He didn't answer immediately. Then, "Yes. I do." "Good," she said. "She deserves someone who shows up like you do." He was still smiling when he hung up. The call from his mother came an hour later. It was less warm. "I have heard things," Mrs. Ryu Boksoon said, her tone precise and controlled. "About a woman in Atlanta." "Her name is Alina," Taejin said. His voice was calm, respectful, immovable. "Taejin. Yama, I am not asking for permission. I am telling you who matters to me, because you matter to me and I don't want there to be secrets between us." He paused. "She is remarkable. She is kind and she is strong and she has survived things that would have broken most people." "And he stopped. Then continued quietly. "I would like for you to know her someday." Silence on the line. Long and heavy. "Focus on the business," his mother said finally, and ended the call. Taejin set his phone down, looked out at the Atlanta skyline from his hotel window, and stayed exactly where he was. It was in the 8th week that everything shifted for Alina. She was sitting in Dr. Webb's office, a regular Friday session, when the therapist gently guided her through something they had been building toward for several weeks. Recounting. Not in full detail. Not all at once. Just pieces. Alina had a photographic memory. She always had. It was the thing that made her exceptional at her job: numbers, documents, conversations, layouts. Everything lived in her mind in perfect, permanent clarity. Every detail accessible at any moment. It was also the reason the memory of what happened to her when she was 18 had never faded. Not even slightly. It was as vivid now as the day it happened: the room, the light, the sounds, every feature of the face she had desperately wished she could forget. Dr. Webb sat with her as she spoke. Calmly. Carefully. "Alina," she said gently, "what you're describing, the level of detail you retain, it may be possible to use that to pursue something." Alina looked up. "What do you mean?" "There are professionals, forensic artists, victim advocates, who work with people who carry this kind of memory. What you remember could be documented." Formally. The room went very quiet. Alina had spent 13 years running from that face. The idea of turning around and walking toward it deliberately, on her own terms, felt like something she could not fully hold in her mind. But she thought about all the Fridays in Dr. Webb's office. All the sessions. All the small pieces of herself she had begun to slowly recover. She thought about the woman she was becoming. "Tell me more," she said. The process took time. Dr. Webb connected her with a victim advocate organization that worked with law enforcement. A forensic artist was brought in, a quiet, patient woman named Sandra, who told Alina to take as much time as she needed, that there was no rush, that she was in control of every step. Alina sat across from Sandra and reached into the part of her memory she had locked with chains for 13 years, and she began to describe. Every detail. Every feature. Precise and unwavering. Sandra's pencil moved. The image took shape. When Sandra turned the sketch pad around and Alina saw the face, rendered clearly, exactly right, her breath caught. Not from fear. Not anymore. From something that felt, for the first time, like power. Like reclaiming something that had been taken from her. She pressed her lips together, held herself steady, and said, "That's him." What followed moved carefully through proper channels. The sketch was run through databases. It matched a name. A real person. A man with a history that told a story far bigger than just Alina's. She was not the only one. The investigation took weeks. But it moved. Steadily and with growing weight. Taejin knew something significant was happening. Alina had shared the broad shape of what she was pursuing without sharing the details, and he had responded the same way he always did, with steadiness, with presence, with zero pressure. Whatever you need, he had told her. I'm here. On the day the arrest was made, Alina sat in her apartment alone, phone in hand, and stared at the notification from the victim advocate who had been walking through the process with her. It was done. She sat very still for a long time. Then she pressed her hand flat against her chest, over her heart, and felt something she could only describe as the first full breath she had taken in 13 years. She called Taejin. He picked up on the second ring. He was arrested today, she said. Her voice was quiet, controlled, but he could hear what lived underneath it, the enormity of it. He was silent for a moment. Alina. I know, she whispered. I know. Are you home? Yes. I'm coming. He brought food she didn't eat and sat with her on her couch while the Atlanta sky went from gold to deep blue to black. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. He was simply there, present and undemanding, while she processed something that had no words big enough to hold it. At some point, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move. Didn't say anything. Just placed his hand over hers where it rested on her knee. They stayed like that until late into the night. A month later, Alina went live. She sat at her desk at home, phone on a small stand, ring light on, face clear and composed. She had not announced it ahead of time. She had just started the live, and within minutes, hundreds of people had joined, and then thousands. She did not share every detail. She was not there to perform her pain. She was there to say what she wished someone had said to her at 18 years old, sitting alone with something too heavy to carry and no one to tell. I am here because I spent 13 years thinking that what happened to me was something I had to survive quietly, she said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were clear. I thought strength meant not talking about it. I thought moving forward meant pretending it didn't exist. I built a career, I built a life, I built every wall I could find, and I called that strength. She paused. It wasn't strength. It was survival. And there is a difference. She looked directly into the camera. Strength is what I found when I finally stopped running. When I walked into a therapist's office and said, I don't know how to do this, but I'm here. When I used everything I am, every gift I was born with, to pursue justice instead of letting shame keep me locked in silence. Her jaw was firm. Her eyes were bright. You are not what happened to you. You are what you decide to do after. And if you are carrying something right now that you think you have to carry alone, you don't. She told them to seek help. She gave resources. She talked about the advocate organization that had walked with her. She talked about therapy. By the time she ended the live 40 minutes later, the comments were flooding in hundreds, then thousands of people sharing pieces of their own stories, saying thank you, saying they had been waiting to hear exactly that, saying she had just changed something for them. Her phone didn't stop for 2 days. The nonprofit came 3 months later. She called it Armor Down because that was exactly what it asked people to do. To be brave enough to lower the armor. To trust that underneath it, they were still whole. It provided free access to therapy, victim advocacy resources, legal navigation support, and community for survivors. She poured herself into it, the same precision, the same strategic mind, the same relentless energy she had always brought to her career, now directed at something that felt like the truest version of what she was supposed to be doing. Taejin sat across from her in her apartment one evening while she worked through the launch logistics, watching her eyes light up as she talked about the first round of program participants. He thought, not for the first time, that she was the most extraordinary person he had ever met. His mother arrived in Atlanta on a quiet Thursday in the fall. She had not announced she was coming in a way that gave anyone time to prepare. That was, Taejin understood, deliberate. She wanted to see without a performance being arranged for her. She met Alina for the first time at a simple dinner. Taejin's sister Soyeon was there too, practically vibrating with the effort of being on her best behavior. Mrs. Ryu Boksoon was elegant, precise, and deeply watchful. She said little at first. She observed. She watched the way Alina spoke, composed and intelligent, and not even slightly performing for approval. She watched the way her son looked when Alina wasn't looking at him. She watched the way Alina looked when she thought no one was paying attention. Over dessert, Mrs. Ryu asked Alina directly, "You built something?" "A foundation." "Yes," Alina said. "Armor Down. It's a non-profit supporting survivors." "Why?" The question was blunt, unadorned, a test wrapped in a single word. Alina met her eyes. "Because someone should have been there for me when I needed it. And since they weren't, I decided to become that for other people." Silence. Mrs. Ryu looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind her eyes, something careful and assessing, and eventually, quietly, something else. Then she said, without looking at her son, "She has substance." So Yun exhaled. Taejin remained perfectly still. "Mrs. My son does not give his attention to things of little value." She paused. Just slightly. "I see why." It was not a grand declaration. It was not a warm embrace or an outpouring of welcome. It was a woman with great pride offering the most honest version of respect she knew how to give. Alina received it the same way it was given. Directly. Gracefully. "Thank you," she said. Simply. Sincerely. Later that night, after his mother had returned to her hotel and So-Yun had disappeared with a victorious smile, Taejin and Alina stood outside on her building's rooftop terrace. Atlanta spread out below them, lit up and breathing, the October air finally cool enough to feel like relief. He stood beside her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I used to stand in places like this and feel like the city was the only thing keeping me company." He looked at her profile. The city lights caught the sharp lines of her face, the jaw, the cheekbones, the eyes that saw everything. "And now?" he asked. She turned to look at him. And this time, she did not build anything between them. No professional distance. No armor. No carefully constructed wall. Just her. Just him. Just the truth of what had grown quietly and stubbornly between them through every session, and every drive home, and every evening of sitting with food she didn't eat and stories that were slowly, carefully making her whole. "Now," she said, "I don't feel alone in it." He reached over and took her hand. Gently. No demand in it. Just the steady, quiet certainty of someone who had decided a long time ago that she was worth staying for. She looked down at their hands. Then back up at him. "I'm not fully healed," she said. Honest, the way she had learned to be. "I don't know when I will be." "I know," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She studied his face, the same face she had pulled up on a screen in her kitchen months ago and stared at for a moment too long. The face of a man who had never once tried to rescue her. Who had simply, consistently shown up. "I believe you," she said. And then, for the first time in 13 years, Alina Cole let herself fall. Not off a ledge. Not into darkness. Into something warm and steady and earned. Into the specific kind of love that doesn't ask you to be fixed before it shows up, the kind that just sits down beside you and says, "I'll wait." She leaned into him. He wrapped his arm around her. And they stood there above the city that had watched her build herself from nothing, the city that was about to watch her build something even bigger, and breathed. 6 months later, Armor Down had served over 300 individuals. 2 additional arrests had been made as other survivors, inspired by Alina's story, came forward using similar processes. Dr. Patricia Webb had joined the nonprofit's advisory board. The victim advocate organization had formally partnered with them. Alina still went to therapy. She had no plans to stop. She still wore her strength like something earned. But now, underneath it, there was something softer, not weakness, but the specific kind of peace that comes from finally setting down what you were never supposed to carry alone. At the Armor Down launch event, a room full of donors, advocates, survivors, and supporters, Taejin sat in the audience and watched Alina take the stage. She stood at the podium in a deep burgundy dress, her shoulders back, her chin level, her eyes scanning the room with the same quiet authority she had always carried. But there was something different now. There was light behind it. She looked out at the crowd, found him, held his gaze for just a moment, a small, private moment that belonged only to them. Then she looked forward, squared her shoulders, and spoke. "I spent a long time believing that strength meant needing nothing and no one," she said. "I was wrong. The strongest thing I have ever done was walk into a room and say I need help. And mean it." She paused. Armor Down is not about weakness. It is about being brave enough to believe you deserve to heal. It is about building a world where no one has to carry what I carried alone in silence for 13 years. She looked out at the room. You are not alone in this. You never were. The applause that followed was the kind that starts slowly and builds until it fills every corner of the room. Taejin clapped with the rest of them and smiled, that quiet, unhurried smile that had, without either of them fully realizing when, become one of Alina's favorite things in the world. Here are the core moral lessons from the story. Strength is not silence. Real strength is not pretending nothing happened. It is having the courage to face your pain and seek help. Healing is not weakness. Going to therapy, speaking up, and asking for support does not make someone fragile. It makes them brave. You can build success and still need healing. Alina was powerful, successful, and independent, yet she still carried pain. Achievement does not erase trauma. Both can exist at the same time. The right love is patient, not forceful. Ryu Taejin did not pressure or try to fix her. He stayed steady. Sometimes love is not about grand gestures, it is about consistency. Justice is possible when courage meets action. Her photographic memory, once a source of pain, became a tool for justice. What hurt you can become part of your power. Speaking up helps others rise. When Alina shared her story, others found courage to tell theirs. One voice can unlock many. You are not defined by what happened to you. Your past may shape you, but it does not own you. Growth is a choice. If this story moved you the way it moved me writing it, I need you to drop something in the comments. Do you think Alina would have opened her heart to Taejin if he had pushed harder instead of simply staying steady? Or was it specifically his patience that broke through her walls? Tell me below, I want to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. See you in the next one.